Step away from that vehicle.
It's my car. I'm just loading groceries.
We got a call about someone breaking into cars. You matched the description.
I literally just walked out of the store. I can show you my receipt.
A receipt proves nothing. Don't reach for
Then
anything.
how am I supposed to
You're
show you
being
registration?
uncooperative. I might need backup.
Back for a federal prosecutor.
So, this story kicks off with a federal prosecutor in a grocery store parking lot. Pretty normal, right? But what happened to him there cracks open something way bigger. A police officer with a really shocking history and a system that, well, it just kept looking the other way. Let's dig into how one single wrongful stop ended up putting an entire system on trial. Just imagine this for a second. You've been stopped by the police. You're trying to do everything right, trying to prove who you are. So you show them your official federal government ID, and the officer just looks at it and says these two words: could be fake. And right there, with that single phrase, that's the heart of a confrontation that honestly should never have happened in the first place. And get this, this whole thing goes down in the most normal, everyday setting you can think of. It's a Saturday afternoon, the parking lot of a Whole Foods. A guy is just loading groceries into his car. I mean, it's a scene you or I could literally walk into any weekend. But on this day, that simple, boring act is about to be seen as a possible crime. And wow, this slide just lays out the whole conflict, doesn't it? On the left, you've got the simple reality. James Mitchell, who happens to be a federal prosecutor, is loading his groceries into his own BMW. But on the right, you see the officer's assumption. This is a possible car break-in. This is that exact moment where two totally different worlds just collide over the very same set of facts. Now, you gotta remember, Mitchell prosecutes federal crimes for a living. He knows how these interactions are supposed to go, so he stays calm. He explains he just finished shopping, and to clear everything up, he carefully takes out his official Department of Justice credentials. We're talking badge, photo ID, the whole thing, and shows them to Officer Cross. And that's when Officer Cross says it. Could be fake. In that moment, James Mitchell knew exactly what was going on. As he put it, the officer had already made up his mind that he was a criminal. It didn't matter what evidence he showed, the groceries, the car, even his federal ID, nothing was going to change that. The assumption came first, and the facts were just getting in the way. So, okay, the situation has totally escalated. Mitchell is now being detained, which is unlawful. But as other officers start showing up, a real investigation is finally about to kick off. And you know what? The evidence is going to speak for itself. A supervisor, Sergeant Denise Harmon, arrives on the scene. Now, she's a 26-year veteran, and this part is critical. She already knows Officer Cross. She'd read his complaint file, she'd recommended discipline for him before, and she was familiar with what she actually called a Nathan Cross special. She knew exactly what was happening here. So unlike Cross, Sergeant Harmon actually starts doing some real police work. It's like, okay, let's look at the facts. She methodically goes through the evidence, checks the groceries and the receipt, runs the car's plates, verifies the federal credentials, and even talks to eyewitnesses. Every single step points to the exact same truth. And the verdict? Well, it was immediate and just completely undeniable. Everything James Mitchell said was true. It was his car, they were his groceries, he was who he said he was, it all checked out. And that's the whole point, right? There was no crime. There was no reasonable suspicion. There was never, ever any reason for this stop. But here's the thing. This explainer isn't just about one really bad stop. Because when James Mitchell started digging into this, he found out that what happened to him wasn't a one-off thing. Oh no, it was a well-documented pattern. Okay, let's talk numbers for a second. First up, 18. That's how many years Officer Nathan Cross had been on the Atlanta police force. A pretty long career. Now, hold on to that number, because here's the next one, 22. That's how many formal complaints had been filed against Officer Cross during those 18 years. That's more than one complaint every single year for his entire career. And this slide, man, this is where it all comes into horrifying focus. Just look at the numbers. 18 years on the force, 22 total complaints. And get this, 19 of those complaints involved Black professionals. But the most shocking number on this whole slide, look at the bottom, 0. No prior disciplinary actions. Despite this clear, years-long pattern, absolutely nothing was ever done. So you have to ask, right? What happens when an officer with a history like this finally stops the wrong guy? A federal prosecutor who knows the law and has the resources to fight back. Well, that's where consequence and accountability finally enter the picture. James Mitchell filed a lawsuit, and the allegations were serious. Not just against Officer Cross, but against the whole department.
You've got racial profiling, unlawful detention, violation of his Fourth Amendment rights. But the real bombshell, the key charge here, was this thing called deliberate indifference. It basically alleged that the department knew about Cross's behavior and just chose to do nothing to stop him. The evidence was it was overwhelming. There was security footage, eyewitnesses, and Cross's own terrible complaint history. The city decided to settle, and the price tag for ignoring this problem for 18 years, $4.2 million. Let that sink in. That's one of the biggest settlements of its kind in Atlanta's history. So, the big question, what happened to Officer Cross? Well, 8 weeks after he detained James Mitchell, Officer Nathan Cross, the man with 22 complaints against him, was fired. His 18-year career was over. The termination letter said it all: racial profiling and a pattern of similar conduct. Finally, a real consequence. But really, this story is so much bigger than one officer's career or one multi-million-dollar settlement. The lawsuit really put the entire system on trial, a system that let an officer with such a clear bias stay on the streets for almost 2 decades. And honestly, James Mitchell said it best himself when he testified. He said, "Look, if this can happen to me, a prosecutor who knows the system from the inside out, what chance does a regular person have?" His case really became a symbol for all the other people who were profiled but didn't have a federal badge to show. So let's circle back to that legal term, deliberate indifference. This is so important because this is why the city had to pay that massive settlement. It means the issue wasn't just one bad apple. The problem was the whole barrel. The department was legally on the hook because they had 22 warnings that Officer Cross was a problem. And for 18 years, they just chose to do nothing. So, in the aftermath, the Atlanta Police Department had to make some changes. They did implement reforms. Now, an automatic investigation gets triggered after 10 complaints. There are new rules for supervisor reviews and body cams. These are all steps that are designed to catch the next Officer Cross before he gets to complaint number 22. And that really brings us to the fundamental question this whole case leaves us wrestling with. These reforms are a reaction, right? But why aren't departments proactive? I mean, the pattern with Officer Cross was obvious by complaint number 5, and it was undeniable by complaint number 10. So why does the system always seem to wait for a crisis before it does anything? So we'll leave you with this thought to chew on. What if accountability wasn't optional? What if it were the law? Just imagine a rule. 5 similar complaints in 5 years and you're off the force. Automatic termination. Is that too harsh? Or is it the only way to actually fix the system before it fails somebody else? You know how a perfectly normal day, a simple trip to the grocery store can just flip in an instant? Well, we're about to dive into one of those moments. It's a confrontation in a parking lot that seems simple on the surface, but it's so much more. This is a story about a decorated federal prosecutor, a police officer with a long history of complaints, and the moment their two worlds collided, exposing a pattern that had gone unchecked for almost 20 years. Just picture it. It's a Saturday afternoon. You're loading your groceries into your own car, minding your own business, when you hear that command. "Sir, step away from that vehicle." Right there, a totally mundane chore becomes this incredibly tense, maybe even life-changing encounter. So, these are the 3 pieces of the puzzle, right? A totally normal activity, a man who has built his entire life around upholding the law, and an officer whose career is just littered with red flags. All of them are about to crash into each other in a Whole Foods parking lot in Atlanta. Now, we're actually going to start this story right at the climax, the stop itself, because you really need to feel the weight of what went down that afternoon before we unpack how we got there. Okay, so the man is James Mitchell. He's in Virginia Highland, a pretty upscale neighborhood in Atlanta. He's just finished shopping, he's putting his bags in the trunk of his BMW, and that's when a police cruiser driven by Officer Nathan Cross pulls right up behind him, blocks him in, and flips on the lights. Just like that, a normal day is over. So, the big question is, who is this officer? And why on earth would he stop a man for just loading groceries? Well, to get that, we have to rewind. We have to look at the almost 2-decade-long pattern that brought Officer Cross to this exact moment. All right, let's talk about Officer Nathan Cross. In his 18 years on the Atlanta police force, he managed to rack up 22 official complaints from citizens. That's more than 1 for every single year of his career. But, it's not just the number that's so shocking. It's who was filing those complaints. That's where the real pattern emerges. So when you dig into the data, it's really staggering. Of those 22 complaints, 19 of them, that's almost 90%, were from Black professionals who were stopped in affluent Atlanta neighborhoods. This wasn't just random bad luck. This was a clear, undeniable MO. And how did the department handle this? Well, you can see for yourself. An architect stopped outside his own office. A college professor followed through a mall. A guy detained while just out for a jog. Every single time a complaint was filed, and every single time the response was the same old thing. More training. Not discipline, not a suspension, just another workshop, another certificate for his file. So you gotta ask, how does an officer get away with this for 18 years? Well, the system basically protected him. His supervisors didn't see harassment, they saw proactive policing that kept the arrest numbers up. His union, of course, defended him at every turn. And the department itself seemed to care more about keeping an officer on the street than actually holding him accountable. There was even an internal affairs file that should have gotten him fired, but it was just ignored. Okay, so now let's turn to the other side of this showdown. Who was the man that Officer Cross decided to stop in that parking lot? As it turns out, he wasn't just any random person. He was, in a way, uniquely equipped to challenge exactly what was happening to him. This is James Mitchell. And for the last 15 years, his job, his entire career, has been to stand up in a courtroom and represent the United States government. He is a major player in the exact same justice system that Officer Cross is supposed to represent out on the street. And his resume, wow, it's impeccable. A graduate of Howard and Emory Law, he spent his career taking on really complex cases. We're talking everything from public corruption to major fraud to, yes, even civil rights violations. His colleagues called him relentless. Defense attorneys, they called him formidable. By any measure, a brilliant and dedicated prosecutor. And all of this created this incredible duality in James Mitchell's life. On one hand, he truly believed in the system. It was his calling. He thought the law could be a powerful force for good. But on the other hand, his job gave him a front row seat to all of its deepest flaws. He'd prosecuted dirty cops. He'd seen cases built on lies. He knew better than anyone that his title as a federal prosecutor didn't make him immune to being profiled. So now that we have the full picture of both men, let's go back to that parking lot, because this is no longer just some routine stop. It's a collision between a man who represents the law's highest ideals and an officer who embodies its most persistent failures. The whole thing kicked off with a really vague dispatch call. Someone reported a suspicious person checking car doors. The description? A black man in his 50s with a nice car. So when Officer Cross shows up, he sees James Mitchell, who, yeah, fits that description. But Cross doesn't see the grocery bags. He doesn't see a guy calmly loading his car. He saw what his 18-year-old pattern had trained his brain to see, a criminal. Things escalated fast. Cross makes the accusation, Mitchell, staying calm, offers proof, his grocery receipt from the store he just left. Cross just dismisses it, literally says a receipt proves nothing. Then he demands to see ID, even though he has no legal reason to. And that's the moment Mitchell, who knows the law inside and out, realizes he has to reveal who he is. This is the absolute turning point. Mitchell isn't just some guy trying to talk his way out of something. He's an expert in the law, calmly and precisely telling this officer, what you are doing is illegal. He literally prosecutes cases just like this one. He's confronting the officer not just with his job title, but with the U.S. Constitution itself. For 18 years, Officer Cross had never, ever faced a real consequence for this behavior. But this time was different. This illegal stop, it was going to have a final, very tangible verdict. $4.2 million. That's how much the city of Atlanta ended up paying James Mitchell in a settlement for this one unlawful stop. It's an absolutely massive number that shows you the real financial cost of unchecked police misconduct. So this one single encounter in a parking lot did what 21 previous complaints couldn't. It finally ended Officer Cross's career, it cost the city's taxpayers millions of dollars, and maybe most importantly, it dragged the department's years of tolerance for this kind of behavior out into the open for everyone to see. You know, this story really drives home a crucial point. James Mitchell was in a unique position. He had the knowledge, the power, and the resources to fight back and actually win. But it leaves us with this huge lingering question. Okay, one officer was finally held accountable. But what about the system that created him, protected him, and let him loose on the public for 18 years? What does justice look like for that?